The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare International Airport hummed overhead as Maya Rodriguez moved through the terminal like a woman being hunted. Because she was. Her oversized sunglasses hid the dark circles under her eyes. 3 nights without real sleep would do that. The navy blue baseball cap pulled low over her forehead concealed most of her face, and she'd deliberately chosen the plainest clothes she owned. Faded jeans, a gray hoodie, and worn sneakers that made no sound on the polished floor. Everything about her appearance screamed, "Ignore me." In a sea of business travelers in sharp suits and families with crying children, Maya had mastered the art of invisibility. She clutched a black backpack against her chest like it contained her beating heart. In many ways, it did. Inside that weathered fabric lay documents that could topple a defense industry giant, expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government contracting, and potentially save countless lives. It also contained enough evidence to get her killed. Maya's hands trembled as she approached Gate B-17. She'd been checking over her shoulder every 30 seconds for the past hour, scanning faces for anyone who might be following her. Twice in the past 3 days, she'd spotted the same black SUV with tinted windows parked outside her apartment. Yesterday morning, she'd returned home to find her front door slightly ajar, her laptop missing, and her kitchen drawer pulled open. They hadn't even tried to hide the fact they'd been there. It was a message: "We know where you live. We can get to you anytime." That's when Maya knew she had to run. She'd worked as a senior cybersecurity analyst at Titan Aerospace Defense for 6 years. Good job, great pay. She'd been proud of her work, proud to contribute to national defense. But 3 weeks ago, while running a routine security audit, she'd stumbled onto encrypted files buried deep in the company's servers. Files that should never have been accessible to her. Files that detailed a scheme so monstrous, she'd sat frozen at her desk for 20 minutes, unable to process what she was reading. Titan Aerospace had knowingly approved defective aircraft parts, engine components with microscopic fractures that would fail under stress. These parts were then installed in military jets, fighter planes that pilots trusted with their lives. The company knew they were faulty. Internal testing had proven it. But fixing the problem would cost over $200 million and delay contracts with the Department of Defense. So executives made a choice: falsify the safety reports, bribe the inspectors, and install the parts anyway. 2 crashes had already occurred. 2 Air Force pilots, Captain Jennifer Mills, 31, and Lieutenant David Chen, 28, had died when their jets malfunctioned during routine training exercises. The official reports blamed pilot error. The families believed their loved ones had made fatal mistakes. Maya knew the truth: Titan Aerospace had murdered them for profit. She'd made copies of everything. Thousands of pages of emails between executives, falsified inspection reports, financial records showing payments to government officials, and engineering analyses proving the company knew about the defects. She'd loaded it all onto 3 encrypted flash drives, printed the most damning documents, and stored everything in her backpack. Then she'd made contact with a journalist in Seattle, Marcus Webb, an investigative reporter for the Pacific Standard who'd won a Pulitzer for exposing defense contractor fraud. He'd agreed to meet her, to review the evidence, to publish the story that would bring Titan Aerospace to its knees. But someone at the company knew. Somehow, they discovered what she'd done. The calls started first. Unknown numbers, dozens of them at all hours. She'd stopped answering after the second day. Then came the black SUVs, the break-in. And yesterday, a man in a dark suit had approached her in the grocery store parking lot. "Ms. Rodriguez," he'd said, his voice calm and cold. "You've taken something that doesn't belong to you. Return it and this all goes away. Keep running and you'll regret it. We know where your sister lives. We know where your mother works. Think about them before you do something stupid." Maya had dropped her groceries and run to her car, hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. Now, standing at Gate B-17, waiting to board Flight 447 to Seattle. She felt like a rabbit trying to outrun wolves. Every businessman on a phone call seemed to be talking about her. Every security guard seemed to be looking for her. Every announcement over the loudspeaker felt like a trap closing in. Now boarding Group 2 for Flight 447 to Seattle, the gate agent announced cheerfully, oblivious to the terror radiating from the woman in sunglasses and a baseball cap. Maya forced herself to breathe. She showed her boarding pass, purchased under her real name, because using a fake ID would only draw more attention, and walked down the jet bridge. Her legs felt like water. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought other passengers must hear it. She found her seat, 23A, a window seat toward the back of the plane. Perfect. She could watch everyone boarding behind her. She stuffed her backpack under the seat in front of her, keeping one foot pressed against it at all times. The documents inside represented truth, justice, and the possibility of redemption for two families who blamed themselves for deaths that weren't their fault. They also represented a target on her back. A flight attendant paused beside her row. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, ma'am? Water, juice?" Maya shook her head, not trusting her voice. "All right, just let me know if you need anything." The attendant moved on, her smile never faltering. Maya turned toward the window, watching ground crews load luggage, watching fuel trucks drive past, watching the ordinary miracle of air travel prepare to unfold. In 90 minutes, she'd land in Seattle. She'd meet Marcus Webb. She'd hand over the evidence. And then her part would be done. She could disappear, change her name, start over somewhere far away. The engines whirred to life. Flight 447 pushed back from the gate. Maya pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. She had no idea that silence would soon become impossible. She had no idea that an engine failure would change everything. And she had no idea that fighter jets were already warming up on a runway 2 states away. 2 hours into the flight, Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. Flight 447 cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, cutting through crystalline blue sky above the Rocky Mountains. Below, the world looked peaceful, jagged peaks dusted with snow, endless forests, winding rivers that caught the morning sunlight like ribbons of silver. Up here, suspended between earth and heaven, Maya felt a fragile sense of safety she hadn't experienced in weeks. The cabin was quiet. Most passengers had settled into their flights, some sleeping, others absorbed in laptops or books. The man in the seat beside her, a businessman in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, hadn't looked up from his computer once since takeoff. He was working on spreadsheets, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman next to him was carrying evidence of corporate manslaughter. Maya kept her backpack on her lap, arms wrapped around it protectively. She couldn't let it out of her sight. Inside were 3 flash drives and a manila envelope stuffed with printed documents. Together, they contained proof of a conspiracy that would shake the defense industry to its core. Her mind drifted back to the moment everything changed, the night 3 weeks ago when she discovered the truth. She'd been working late at Titan Aerospace's headquarters in downtown Chicago, running a routine cybersecurity audit. It was tedious work, scanning thousands of files for vulnerabilities, checking encryption protocols, ensuring classified information remained secure. At 11:47 p.m., her software had flagged an anomaly. A folder buried 7 layers deep in the company's server system, protected by military-grade encryption that shouldn't have been there. Maya was good at her job, exceptional even. She'd cracked the encryption in 40 minutes. What she found inside had made her blood run cold. Email chains between Titan's CEO, Richard Vance, and the vice president of manufacturing, discussing acceptable failure rates for engine components. Engineering reports showing stress fractures in turbine blades that would catastrophically fail under high-temperature conditions. Financial projections calculating that recalling the defective parts would cost $247 million and delay contracts by 18 months. And then the decision. Install them anyway, falsify the inspection reports, and hope the failure rate stayed below 2%. 2%. They'd literally calculated how many pilots they were willing to kill. Maya had sat frozen at her desk, her hands hovering over the keyboard, unable to process the enormity of what she'd discovered. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were human lives. Fighter pilots, men and women who'd sworn to defend their country, flying planes with components that Titan Aerospace knew were defective. She'd kept reading, unable to stop, each document worse than the last. Captain Jennifer Mills had died on October 14th when her F-18's engine exploded during a training exercise over Nevada. The official investigation blamed pilot error during a high-stress maneuver. Maya found internal emails celebrating that the incident had been successfully attributed to operator mistake. They'd used a dead woman's reputation to cover their tracks. Lieutenant David Chen had crashed 2 months later during a routine patrol flight. Engine failure at 20,000 feet, ejection seat malfunction. He died on impact. His family had been told he'd failed to follow proper emergency procedures. Maya found memos discussing how to manage the narrative and minimize company liability. She'd copied everything that night, downloaded thousands of files onto encrypted flash drives, printed the most damning evidence, and then she'd sat in her car in the parking garage until dawn, trying to decide what to do. Maya wasn't naive. She knew what happened to whistleblowers in the defense industry. She'd watched documentaries about people who tried to expose contractor fraud, people who'd lost their jobs, their savings, their reputations. Some had faced federal charges for handling classified information. Some had simply disappeared, their cases settled quietly out of court with NDAs and gag orders. But 2 pilots were dead. Their families deserved the truth. She'd spent a week researching journalists, looking for someone with the credibility and courage to publish a story this big. Marcus Webb at the Pacific Standard had the perfect track record: 3 major investigations into defense contractors, 2 congressional hearings triggered by his reporting, and a Pulitzer Prize sitting on his desk. She'd contacted him through an encrypted email service, sent him a sample of the evidence, and waited. He'd responded within hours, "This is massive, when can we meet?" They'd arranged to meet in Seattle, neutral territory far from Chicago. Maya had booked the flight, planning to slip away quietly and return before Titan even noticed she was gone. But they'd noticed, somehow they'd known. Now, staring out the airplane window at the mountains below, Maya replayed every possible way they could have discovered her. Had they detected her access to the encrypted files? Had someone seen her printing documents late at night? Or was there a mole, someone monitoring employee communications, watching for signs of disloyalty? Her phone sat in her pocket, powered off but still terrifying. Before boarding, she'd checked it one last time. 43 missed calls from unknown numbers. 7 voicemails, all from different people, all with the same message. "Ms. Rodriguez, you need to return what you've taken. This doesn't have to get ugly." But it was already ugly. 2 pilots were dead, their families traumatized, their reputations destroyed. Hundreds more pilots were flying planes with defective parts, unaware they were sitting on potential death traps. And Titan Aerospace was making billions, protected by government contracts and the shield of national security. Maya pressed her hand against the backpack, feeling the hard edges of the flash drives through the fabric. Inside those tiny devices was enough evidence to bring down Richard Vance, to trigger federal investigations, to force recalls of every defective part Titan had ever installed. Inside was justice for Captain Mills and Lieutenant Chen. Inside was also a death sentence if the wrong people got hold of it. The businessman beside her suddenly closed his laptop and stood, excusing himself to use the restroom. Maya watched him go, then allowed herself to relax slightly, leaning her head against the window. The plane's engines hummed steadily, a white noise that almost felt peaceful. She thought about her sister, Emma, who knew nothing about any of this. She thought about her mother, retired and living in Florida, blissfully unaware her daughter was carrying classified documents across state lines. She'd kept them in the dark deliberately. What they didn't know couldn't hurt them. Marcus Webb would know what to do with the evidence. He'd publish the story, trigger investigations, ensure the truth came out. Maya just had to get to Seattle. Just 90 more minutes. Just hold on a little longer. She checked her watch. 11:47 a.m. The same time, down to the minute, that she'd first opened those encrypted files 3 weeks ago. Maya didn't believe in signs or fate, but the coincidence felt meaningful somehow, like the universe was acknowledging the weight of what she carried. The plane hit a patch of light turbulence, bouncing gently. Maya's stomach fluttered, but she kept her eyes on the mountains below, beautiful and indifferent, ancient and unchanging. She had no idea that in exactly 13 minutes, those mountains would become the least of her concerns. She had no idea that Flight 447's left engine was about to fail catastrophically. And she had no idea that her careful plan to remain invisible was about to be shattered by an emergency that would put her face to face with the very authorities she was trying to avoid. The plane flew on, steady and smooth. For now, the explosion shattered the peaceful silence like a gunshot in a library. Boom! Flight 447 lurched violently to the left, throwing Maya against the window so hard her sunglasses flew off. The businessman's laptop sailed through the air, slamming into the seat in front of them. Screams erupted throughout the cabin as the plane shuddered and dropped, a sickening, stomach-in-your-throat sensation that made Maya's entire body go rigid with primal terror. The oxygen masks deployed with a chorus of mechanical clicks, yellow cups dangling on rubber tubes like macabre party decorations. The cabin lights flickered. Someone's carry-on bag burst open in the overhead compartment, spilling clothes and toiletries into the aisle. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," the woman across the aisle chanted, clutching her armrests with white knuckles. Maya's hands flew to her backpack, which had slid halfway under the seat in front of her. She grabbed it, pulled it against her chest, her heart hammering so violently she could feel her pulse in her temples. Through the window, she saw something that turned her blood to ice. Fire. Orange and yellow flames shot from the left engine, trailing thick black smoke that streamed behind the plane like a funeral shroud. The engine cowling had peeled back, revealing twisted metal and mechanical carnage. As Maya watched, frozen in horror, chunks of debris tore away from the damaged engine and disappeared into the sky behind them. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain." The voice over the intercom was no longer calm, no longer reassuring. It cracked with barely controlled panic. "We have experienced a catastrophic failure of our port engine. Flight ATTNDNTS, secure the cabin immediately. PASSNGRS, PUT on your oxygen masks and assume brace positions." The plane dropped again, 100 feet in seconds. Maya's stomach lurched. A child somewhere in the cabin was screaming. A flight attendant stumbled past, her face pale, frantically checking that passengers had their masks on properly. Maya fumbled with her oxygen mask, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get it over her face. The plastic cup pressed against her nose and mouth, the elastic band pulling at her hair. She sucked in air that tasted metallic and wrong, each breath ragged and desperate. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to land quietly in Seattle, meet Marcus Webb, hand over the evidence and disappear. Clean, simple, invisible. Now the plane was falling out of the sky, trailing smoke and fire, and every emergency system on board was screaming danger. Her careful plan was disintegrating at 35,000 feet. Through the window, Maya watched the ground rising slowly, too slowly, as the captain fought to maintain altitude on a single engine. The Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly below, their snow-capped peaks beautiful and deadly. If they went down out here in this wilderness, rescue would take hours, maybe days. If there were survivors. Her backpack pressed against her chest, and suddenly Maya was struck by the horrible irony. She'd been so worried about Titan Aerospace finding her, about black SUVs and men in dark suits. She'd never considered that she might die in a plane crash, the very thing her stolen evidence was meant to prevent. Was this the universe's punishment? Cosmic justice for a whistleblower flying on a commercial jet, carrying proof that aircraft parts were defective, only to have her own plane's engine explode. Maya pushed the thought away. This was a different airline, different aircraft, different components. This was just catastrophically bad timing. Or was it? A colder thought crept into her mind, making her skin crawl despite the chaos around her. What if this wasn't an accident? What if Titan Aerospace had somehow sabotaged Flight 447? They'd already killed 2 pilots to cover up their crimes. They'd broken into her apartment. They'd threatened her family. Would they really hesitate to bring down an entire commercial flight to stop her? Maya looked around the cabin with new horror. 87 passengers and 6 crew members. 87 innocent people who had nothing to do with her whistleblowing, who'd simply wanted to fly from Chicago to Seattle, who were now clutching oxygen masks and praying they'd see their families again. If Titan had done this, if they'd orchestrated this engine failure to kill her, then she brought death to everyone on this plane. Mayday, mayday, mayday. The captain's voice crackled over the radio, audible through the thin cockpit door. United Flight 447, we've lost Engine 1. Catastrophic failure. We're at 28,000 feet and descending. Requesting emergency vectors to nearest suitable airport. We have souls on board. Souls on board. That's what they called passengers when a plane was going down. Not people, not customers, souls. Maya pressed her forehead against the window, watching black smoke continue to pour from the destroyed engine. The flames had subsided slightly. Maybe the fire suppression system was working, but the damage was clearly severe. Metal hung at impossible angles. The engine nacelle looked like it had been hit with a giant hammer. The businessman beside her was praying in Spanish, his eyes squeezed shut, lips moving rapidly. Behind her, someone was crying. Across the aisle, a mother held her young daughter, whispering, "It's okay, baby, it's okay," over and over like an incantation against death. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. If they made it down safely, there would be investigations. The FAA would examine the engine. The NTSB would interview passengers. Airport security would be everywhere. Federal authorities would flood the scene. And Maya would be trapped, stuck in some remote Montana airport with her backpack full of classified documents, unable to move, unable to disappear, surrounded by exactly the kind of law enforcement attention she'd been desperately trying to avoid. If Titan had people watching airports, and she had to assume they did, they'd know exactly where she was. She'd be cornered, vulnerable. Unless she got rid of the evidence, hid the flash drive somewhere, left the documents in a bathroom, walked away clean. Maya looked down at her backpack. Inside were the last words of Captain Jennifer Mills, preserved in email form. "Something feels wrong with this bird, but the inspections all came back clean. I trust the engineers." Inside were Lieutenant David Chen's final flight logs, documenting engine irregularities he'd reported 3 times before the crash that killed him. Inside were the names of executives who'd knowingly sent pilots to their deaths. She couldn't let go, not now, not after coming this far. The plane shuddered again, and through the window, Maya saw something that made her heart stop completely. 2 fighter jets, sleek, deadly F-16s, appeared alongside the crippled airliner, one on each wing. They flew impossibly close, close enough that Maya could see the pilots in their cockpits, their helmets and visors reflecting the afternoon sun. The jets maintained perfect formation, matching Flight 447 speed and trajectory exactly. Military escort. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened on the backpack until her knuckles went white. Fighter jets didn't escort commercial planes for engine failures. Fighter jets escorted planes for hijackings, for terrorist threats, for national security emergencies. They knew, somehow impossibly, they knew what she was carrying. And now there was nowhere left to run. Billings Logan International Airport materialized below like a scene from an apocalypse film. Every emergency vehicle in Montana seemed to be converging on the single runway. Fire trucks lined both sides, their red lights spinning in synchronized chaos. Ambulances formed a perimeter, paramedics standing beside open doors, waiting. Foam trucks positioned themselves at strategic intervals, ready to spray flame-retardant chemicals if the damaged engine reignited on impact. But it was the other vehicles that made Maya's blood run cold. Black SUVs, at least a dozen of them, surrounded the designated emergency landing zone. Men in dark suits and tactical gear stood in formation, hands near their weapons, faces obscured by sunglasses and earpieces. FBI windbreakers were visible on some. Others wore Homeland Security insignia. Still others wore no identifying marks at all, which somehow made them more terrifying. This wasn't a standard emergency response. This was a federal operation. "Cabin crew, prepare for emergency landing," the captain's voice announced, steadier now but edged with exhaustion. "Brace positions in 30 seconds." Maya pressed her face against the window, watching the ground rush up to meet them. The plane descended faster than felt safe, the single working engine screaming with effort. Through the smoke still trailing from the destroyed port engine, she could see the entire welcoming committee growing larger, more detailed, more real. They were waiting for her, all of them, waiting to arrest her, to seize the evidence, to make her disappear into the same federal machinery that had allowed Titan Aerospace to kill pilots with impunity. "Brace, brace, brace," the flight attendants shouted in unison. Maya wrapped her arms around her backpack, tucked her head down and prayed. Not the formal prayers she'd learned as a child, but desperate bargaining with a universe that seemed determined to destroy her. "Please, just let me survive this. Let me get the truth out. Let those families know their loved ones didn't fail." The wheels hit the runway with a violence that rattled her teeth. The plane bounced once, twice, then slammed down hard enough to deploy the emergency slides. Brakes screamed. The aircraft shuddered and fishtailed slightly, the damaged side listing ominously. For a horrifying moment, Maya thought they might cartwheel, flip end over end in a cascade of metal and fire. But the captain held it steady. The plane decelerated, slower, slower, finally rolling to a stop at the far end of the runway. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence in the cabin. Then someone started crying. Then someone else started laughing, high hysterical laughter born of relief and shock. Then everyone was talking at once, a cacophony of prayers and curses and disbelief. "We made it," the businessman beside Maya whispered, crossing himself. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, we made it." Maya couldn't speak. Her hands were locked around her backpack, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and terror. Through the window, she watched the emergency vehicles race toward them, watched the black SUVs follow close behind. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened," a flight attendant announced, her voice shaking. "Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to leave the aircraft. Federal authorities are boarding. Please remain calm and follow all instructions." Federal authorities. The words confirmed Maya's worst fears. The cabin erupted in confused murmuring. "Why are federal agents here?" someone asked loudly. "This was just an engine failure, right?" Another passenger pulled out their phone, already trying to livestream despite the flight attendant's protests about device restrictions. Maya watched through her window as the forward door opened. 4 men in dark suits entered the cabin, their movements practiced and efficient. Behind them, she could see more agents forming a perimeter around the plane. No one was getting off this aircraft without their permission. The lead agent was tall and broad-shouldered, with steel-gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too many dark things. He moved down the aisle slowly, deliberately, his eyes scanning each passenger with trained precision. A younger agent followed, speaking quietly into a radio. Two more agents positioned themselves at the exits, hands resting casually on their service weapons. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to disappear into the floor. The backpack in her arms suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside were documents stamped classified. Inside was evidence of crimes that touched the highest levels of defense contracting. Inside was enough material to put her in federal prison for decades, regardless of whether her motives were pure. The lead agent stopped at row 23, Maya's row. She looked up, meeting his eyes, prepared to surrender, prepared for handcuffs and rights being read and her life effectively ending. He looked at her for a long moment, then he moved past. Maya's breath caught, confusion flooded through her. He'd walked right past her. The agents weren't coming for her at all. They stopped 3 rows ahead, row 18. "Sir," the lead agent said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent cabin, "please stand up slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." A middle-aged man in a gray business suit rose shakily from his seat. He was ordinary-looking, receding hairline, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting. His hands trembled as he raised them. "Are you Vincent Michael Caruso?" The name sent shockwaves through the cabin. Maya heard gasps, heard someone whisper, "Oh my God," heard phones being pulled out as passengers frantically Googled the name. Vincent Caruso, CEO of Meridian Pharmaceuticals, embezzled $43 million from investors, disappeared 3 years ago, on the FBI's most wanted list for wire fraud, money laundering, and securities fraud. Yes, the man said quietly, his voice barely audible. "Yes, I'm Vincent Caruso." "Mr. Caruso, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." The agent continued reading Miranda rights while 2 others moved in to handcuff the fugitive. Passengers stared in shock and disbelief. Camera phones captured every second. The woman in front of Maya whispered urgently into her phone, "You're not going to believe this. There's a fugitive on our plane." Maya sat frozen, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The fighter jets, the federal presence, the massive law enforcement response. None of it was for her. It was all for Vincent Caruso, a white-collar criminal who'd been living under a false identity for 3 years, who'd made the fatal mistake of booking a flight from Chicago to Seattle on the same day Maya Rodriguez decided to run. The agents led Caruso down the aisle, his head down, his expensive suit rumpled from the emergency landing. As they passed Maya's row, he glanced at her briefly. Their eyes met for just a second. In his expression, she saw resignation, exhaustion, and something like relief. The relief of a man who'd been running for so long that capture almost felt like freedom. Then he was gone, escorted off the plane by 6 federal agents while passengers recorded everything on their phones. "Ladies and gentlemen," the flight attendant announced, her voice steadier now, "we apologize for the delay. Deplaning will begin momentarily. Please gather your belongings and exit through the forward door. Emergency slides will not be deployed. Paramedics are standing by if anyone requires medical attention. Thank you for your patience during this extraordinary situation." Extraordinary, that was one word for it. Maya sat motionless, still clutching her backpack, her heart slowly returning to a normal rhythm. Around her, passengers excitedly discussed the arrest, already crafting the story they'd tell for years. "I was on the plane when they caught Vincent Caruso." No one was looking at her. No one cared about the quiet woman in row 23 with the baseball cap and the worn backpack. She was invisible again. But as the adrenaline faded, a new terror crept in. She was stranded in Billings, Montana, with a plane that wouldn't fly again for days. Her connecting flight to Seattle was obviously canceled. The airport would be crawling with federal agents processing the Caruso arrest. And somewhere out there, Titan Aerospace was still hunting her. The universe had saved her life with that engine failure. The fighter jet escort for Caruso had provided perfect cover, making her surveillance fears seem paranoid rather than prescient. But Maya's journey was far from over. In fact, the hardest part was just beginning. She stood on shaking legs, adjusted her backpack, and followed the other passengers toward the exit, where freedom and danger waited in equal measure. The terminal at Billings Logan International Airport erupted into controlled chaos the moment passengers from Flight 447 entered. News crews had already descended like vultures, cameras pointed at the doorway, reporters shouting questions over each other. Police officers struggled to maintain order as curious onlookers pressed against the security barriers. Phones held high to capture footage of the dramatic arrest. Maya kept her head down, baseball cap pulled low, moving with the crowd of deplaning passengers. Her legs felt like water, each step requiring conscious effort. The backpack weighed heavy on her shoulders, not from its physical contents, but from the psychological burden of carrying evidence that could still destroy her if discovered. "Can you confirm Vincent Caruso was on your flight?" A reporter thrust a microphone toward a businessman near Maya. "Yeah, it was insane. The FBI came on board and arrested him right in front of us," the man replied eagerly, already savoring his moment of fame. Another reporter shouted, "What was the emergency? We heard there was an engine explosion." Maya slipped past the media scrum, blending into the background as passengers competed to tell their version of events. Everyone wanted to be part of the story, everyone except her. She found a quiet corner near gate C12, collapsed into a plastic chair, and finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were still shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to regain control of her body's involuntary terror response. The television screens throughout the terminal all showed the same breaking news. FBI, CAPTURES fugitive financier on disabled flight. Vincent Caruso's booking photo from 3 years ago appeared on screen, younger, healthier, arrogant. The man they'd arrested today looked hollowed out, like someone who'd been running for so long he'd forgotten why he started. Maya pulled out her phone, still in airplane mode, and stared at the screen. 43 missed calls, 19 text messages, all from unknown numbers. She didn't need to read them to know what they said. Titan Aerospace was still looking for her. But they didn't know where she was, not yet. The engine failure had actually saved her. If Flight 447 had landed normally in Seattle, she'd have walked into a terminal where Titan's people might be waiting. Instead, she was stranded in Billings, a city she'd never planned to visit in a state she'd barely thought about. Random, unpredictable, safe, at least temporarily. A family sat down near her, mother, father, 2 young children still wound up from the excitement. "Did you see the fire, Daddy?" the little boy asked, his eyes wide. "It was so scary." "But the pilots kept us safe, buddy," the father replied, ruffling his son's hair. "And now we have the best story to tell Grandma." Maya watched them, something twisting in her chest. That father trusted the aircraft. He trusted the mechanics who'd inspected it, the engineers who designed it, the company that manufactured its parts. He'd put his children on that plane believing the system worked, that safety regulations meant something, that profit would never be prioritized over human life. He had no idea how fragile that trust really was. Captain Jennifer Mills had trusted the system too. So had Lieutenant David Chen. They'd both died because executives at Titan Aerospace decided quarterly earnings were more important than human lives. Maya's resolve hardened. She couldn't stop now, not when she'd come this far. She pulled up the airline app on her phone, finally switching off airplane mode. Notifications flooded in immediately. More missed calls, more texts, more threats disguised as friendly warnings. She ignored them all and checked flight options. Seattle flights, all booked solid for the next 2 days due to the diverted passengers from Flight 447. Chicago flights, available, but returning to Chicago meant walking straight back into Titan's reach. Maya scrolled through the options, her finger hovering over different cities. Portland, Denver, Phoenix. She could disappear to any of them, but that didn't solve her problem. Marcus Webb was in Seattle, waiting for evidence that wasn't coming. The documents in her backpack were worthless if she couldn't deliver them to someone who could publish the truth. Then she saw it. Washington, D.C. one flight leaving at 6:47 p.m. 5 seats available. Maya's mind raced. Washington, the Department of Defense Inspector General's office, the FBI headquarters, congressional oversight committees. If she couldn't get to a journalist, she could go directly to the people with the power to investigate, prosecute, and shut down Titan Aerospace's operations. It was riskier. Federal authorities could arrest her for possessing classified documents before they even looked at what those documents revealed. But it was also more direct, more final. If she walked into the Inspector General's office with this evidence, there would be no hiding it, no burying it, no making it disappear. Before she could second-guess herself, Maya booked the ticket. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. Flight 892 to Washington Dulles, departing 6:47 p.m., arriving 12:34 a.m. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number, 54th call of the day. This time Maya answered. Ms. Rodriguez, a woman's voice smooth and cold as ice. We've been trying to reach you. I know, Maya said quietly. Then you know we can make this very simple. Tell us where you are. We'll send someone to pick you up. You return what you took, sign some papers, and this all goes away. We'll even offer you a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, full benefits, a glowing reference. 2 pilots are dead because of what your company did. Silence on the other end. Then, you don't understand the complexity of defense contracting, Ms. Rodriguez. There are acceptable risk thresholds, cost-benefit analyses. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. The greater good, Maya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You falsified safety reports. You knew those parts were defective and you installed them anyway. Jennifer Mills was 31 years old. David Chen had a wife and a baby daughter. You killed them for profit. Careful, Ms. Rodriguez. Defamation is a serious charge, and theft of classified documents is a federal crime. Right now, you're looking at 20 years in prison, but we can make that disappear. We can protect you. We take care of our people. The way you took care of Captain Mills, the way you took care of Lieutenant Chen. Another pause. When the woman spoke again, her voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. You're in Billings. We know the flight you were on. We know you're stranded. Airport security footage is being reviewed as we speak. You have maybe 3 hours before we find you. Stop being stupid. Tell us where you are. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. How did you cause the engine failure? Excuse me. The explosion on Flight 447. Did you sabotage it? Were you willing to kill 87 people just to stop me? The woman laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You think very highly of yourself, Ms. Rodriguez. That was a mechanical failure, pure coincidence. Though I suppose it proves our point. Aircraft components fail sometimes. It's the nature of complex machinery. Doesn't mean there's a conspiracy. Then why are fighter jets escorting commercial flights with engine failures? Another pause. What fighter jets? The confusion in the woman's voice sounded genuine. She didn't know about the F-16s. She didn't know about Vincent Caruso, which meant Titan's surveillance wasn't as comprehensive as they wanted Maya to believe. Never mind, Maya said. I'm done talking. Wait. Maya hung up. Her heart pounded, but she felt clearer than she had in days. They were scrambling. They were worried. Good. Let them worry. She stood, adjusted her backpack, and walked toward the airport cafe. She had 5 hours until her flight to Washington. 5 hours to prepare what she'd say to federal investigators. 5 hours to decide how much of her life she was willing to sacrifice for the truth. The cafe's television showed continuous coverage of Vincent Caruso's arrest. The fugitive was recognized by a passenger during the flight, the anchor explained. When the plane experienced mechanical difficulties, federal authorities coordinated with NORAD to provide fighter jet escort, ensuring Caruso couldn't escape during the emergency landing. Maya ordered coffee she didn't want and sat at a table facing the terminal. Around her, life continued normally. Business travelers typed on laptops. Families waited at gates. TSA agents checked boarding passes. The machinery of modern air travel hummed along, oblivious to the fact that a woman with evidence of corporate murder sat among them. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Maya let it ring. She thought about Captain Mill's family, who'd spent 3 years blaming their daughter for a crash that wasn't her fault. She thought about Lieutenant Chen's widow, raising her baby alone, told her husband had made a fatal error in judgment. She thought about all the other pilots still flying planes with Titan's defective parts, trusting systems that had been compromised by greed. Then Maya opened her laptop, loaded the files from her flash drive, and began organizing her evidence for presentation to the Department of Defense Inspector General. She was done running, done hiding, done being silent. If they wanted to stop her now, they'd have to do it in front of federal investigators. Maya's coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she kept wrapping her hands around the cup anyway, needing something to hold onto. The airport cafe had emptied as the afternoon stretched toward evening. Only a few scattered travelers remained, a businessman on a video call, a teenager with headphones, an elderly couple sharing a sandwich. Her laptop screen glowed with damning evidence. Email after email, report after report, a digital paper trail of corporate murder dressed up in business language and technical jargon. She'd been organizing it for the Inspector General, creating a chronological timeline, highlighting the most egregious violations, preparing to hand over everything she knew. But doubt had begun creeping in like fog through a cracked door. What if they arrested her the moment she walked into a federal building? What if possession of classified documents landed her in prison before anyone even looked at what those documents revealed? Whistleblower protections were supposed to exist, but Maya had read enough news stories to know they were flimsy shields against determined prosecutors. She thought about Edward Snowden, exiled in Russia, Chelsea Manning, imprisoned for years, Reality Winner, sentenced to 5 years for leaking a single document. The government didn't always distinguish between heroes and traitors until long after lives were destroyed. Her phone buzzed for what felt like the 100th time. Maya glanced at the screen, another unknown number. She'd stopped answering after the woman's call earlier, but they kept trying, relentless, desperate. She was about to silence the phone entirely when it buzzed again, but this time with a text message from a number she recognized. Her sister, Emma. Maya, where are you? Mom's worried. You haven't called in 3 days. People came to my apartment asking about you, corporate security from your company. They seemed really concerned. They said you might be having a mental health crisis. Call me, please. Maya's stomach dropped. They'd gone to Emma. They were building a narrative. Maya Rodriguez, unstable employee, suffering from paranoid delusions, stole company property during a psychotic break. By the time she tried to present her evidence, they'd have her credibility destroyed. Her hands shook as she typed a response. I'm fine. Don't talk to anyone from Titan. I'll explain everything soon. I love you. Before she could hit send, another call came through. Same unknown number as before. Maya stared at it, her thumb hovering over the decline button. Then, driven by something between courage and recklessness, she answered. "Ms. Rodriguez," a man's voice this time, deep and measured, not the cold woman from before, but someone else, someone who sounded almost reasonable. "My name is Richard Vance. I'm the CEO of Titan Aerospace. I think we need to talk." Maya's breath caught. Richard Vance, the man whose name appeared on dozens of the emails she'd copied, the man who'd personally approved the installation of defective parts, the man responsible for 2 deaths and counting. "I have nothing to say to you," Maya managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please just listen. I understand you're upset. You found some concerning information and your reaction is understandable, but you're looking at a very incomplete picture. Defense contracting is complex. There are layers of oversight, testing protocols, safety margins built into every component. What looks damning out of context has perfectly reasonable explanations. Captain Jennifer Mills is dead because of your reasonable explanations. Captain Mills died in a tragic accident. Her family has been compensated. The investigation was thorough and—" "The investigation was a lie." Maya's voice rose, drawing glances from the few other people in the cafe. She lowered it to an angry whisper. "You falsified the reports. You paid off inspectors. I have the emails, Vance. I have everything." A long silence. When Vance spoke again, the reasonable tone had evaporated. "You have classified documents that you obtained illegally. Documents that, in the wrong hands, could compromise national security. Right now, you're wanted for theft of classified information, computer fraud, and violation of the Espionage Act. That's 30 years minimum, but I can make that go away." "How generous." "I'm serious, Ms. Rodriguez. We both know you're not a spy or a criminal. You're a good person who saw something that scared you and made an impulsive decision. We can fix this. You return the documents, sign an NDA, and we'll provide you with a 7-figure settlement. You'll never have to work again. You can disappear anywhere you want, Europe, Asia, South America, fresh start, new life. All of this becomes a bad memory." 7 figures. Maya thought about her student loans, her aging mother's medical bills, her sister's struggling small business. She thought about a life without constantly looking over her shoulder, without fearing every black SUV, without wondering if she'd end up in prison or worse. "And Captain Mills' family?" Maya asked quietly. "Lieutenant Chen's widow and daughter, what do they get?" "They've been compensated according to military protocols. Life insurance, survivor benefits. Their loved ones died serving their country. That's honorable. That's meaningful. That's based on a lie." "Truth is complicated, Ms. Rodriguez. Sometimes protecting the greater good means accepting that not every detail needs to be public. Titan Aerospace employs 70,000 people. We're the primary contractor for 6 different aircraft programs. If you destroy this company with your leaked documents, you're not just hurting executives. You're putting 70,000 families out of work. You're compromising national defense programs. You're creating chaos that serves no one." Maya closed her eyes. He was good. She could hear why he'd risen to CEO. He knew how to find pressure points, how to make self-interest and moral compromise sound reasonable. "I'm at Billings Airport right now," Vance continued. "I flew here personally when I heard about Flight 447's emergency landing. I can be at the terminal in 15 minutes. We'll sit down, have a conversation like adults, and resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone. No lawyers, no threats, just 2 people finding a solution." "You're here in Billings." "I told you, Ms. Rodriguez, this matters to me. This company matters. Those 70,000 employees matter. I'm willing to meet you face to face to resolve this." Maya's heart raced. He was here, in the same airport, maybe watching her right now. The friendly tone, the reasonable offer, it was all a trap. If she agreed to meet him, she'd be escorted somewhere private, the documents would be seized, and she'd sign whatever they put in front of her or face consequences too terrifying to imagine. She thought about Vincent Caruso, arrested just hours ago. How long had he run before getting caught? 3 years. And he'd still ended up in handcuffs, his freedom gone in an instant. But Caruso had stolen money. Maya was trying to save lives. "No," she said firmly. "I'm sorry. No, I'm not meeting you. I'm not returning the documents. I'm not signing anything. 2 pilots are dead because your company chose profit over safety. Their families deserve the truth. Every pilot flying planes with your defective parts deserves the truth, and I'm going to make sure they get it." Vance's voice turned to ice. "You're making a mistake, a life-destroying mistake. The federal government doesn't look kindly on people who steal classified information regardless of their motives. You'll be prosecuted. You'll be bankrupted by legal fees. You'll spend decades in prison. And for what? For nothing. Because no one will believe you. We have lawyers, PR firms, government connections. By the time we're done, you'll be painted as an unstable employee with a grudge. Your evidence will be dismissed as manipulated. Your reputation will be destroyed." "Maybe," Maya said, "but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." "Last chance, Ms. Rodriguez. Meet me in the next 30 minutes, or I call the FBI and report you for theft of classified documents. They'll arrest you before you leave this airport." Maya looked at her laptop, at the organized files, at the evidence of crimes that had killed 2 people and endangered countless others. She looked at her backpack, at the flash drives that contained truth powerful enough to topple an empire built on lies. She thought about Captain Mill's last email. Something feels wrong with this bird. She thought about Lieutenant Chen's flight logs, documenting problems he'd reported over and over, problems that were ignored until they killed him. "Do what you have to do," Maya said. "I'm doing what I have to do." She hung up. For a moment, Maya sat frozen, her heart hammering, wondering if she'd just signed her own arrest warrant. Around her, the airport continued its normal rhythms, oblivious to the war being waged in whispered phone calls and classified documents. Then she closed her laptop, packed her belongings, and checked the time. 2 hours until her flight to Washington, D.C., 2 hours to get through security, to reach her gate, to stay free long enough to deliver truth to people with the power to act on it. Maya stood, adjusted her backpack, and walked toward the security checkpoint. Behind her, she didn't see the man in the dark suit watching from across the terminal, speaking urgently into his phone. She didn't see Richard Vance entering through the main doors, flanked by 2 corporate security officers. But she felt their presence like a storm approaching, and she walked faster. Maya's hands trembled as she placed her backpack on the security conveyor belt. The TSA agent barely glanced at her, just another tired traveler in a baseball cap, one of thousands passing through checkpoints every day. But Maya felt like a neon sign advertising fugitive with stolen documents. The backpack disappeared into the X-ray machine. Maya walked through the metal detector, forcing herself to breathe normally, to not look back, to not scan the terminal for Richard Vance and his security team. Beep. Her heart stopped. The TSA agent gestured her aside. "Ma'am, step over here, please." This was it, they'd found something. Vance had called ahead. She was about to be arrested. "You have a laptop in your bag?" the agent asked, pulling her backpack from the conveyor. "Yes," Maya whispered. "Need to check it separately, just standard procedure." The agent pulled out her laptop, ran it through again, then handed everything back. "You're all set. Have a good flight." Maya grabbed her belongings with shaking hands and walked toward the gates, not allowing herself to look back until she'd rounded a corner. When she finally glanced behind her, she saw Vance and 2 security officers arguing with TSA agents at the checkpoint. They couldn't follow her past security without boarding passes. She'd bought herself time, 2 hours, that's all she needed. Gate D7 was nearly empty when Maya arrived, just a handful of passengers waiting for the red-eye to Washington. She chose a seat facing away from the terminal, pulled out her phone, and did something she'd been avoiding. She called Marcus Webb, the journalist in Seattle. Maya Rodriguez. His voice was alert despite the late hour. "I've been trying to reach you. Your flight landed in Billings. What happened?" "Engine failure, emergency landing. It's a long story." Maya took a deep breath. "Marcus, I can't get to Seattle. I'm flying to D.C. instead. I'm going directly to the Inspector General." Silence. "Then, that's risky. They could arrest you before they even look at your evidence." "I know, but I need you as backup. I'm emailing you copies of everything right now. If anything happens to me, if I'm arrested, if the evidence disappears, you publish it all. Promise me." "I promise." "Maya, are you sure about this? Once you walk into that federal building, there's no going back." Maya thought about Captain Jennifer Mills, who'd never gotten a chance to go back. About Lieutenant David Chen, whose last words to his wife were, "I love you, see you tonight," before a defective engine component ended his life. About the hundreds of other pilots still flying planes with Titans ticking time bombs installed. "I'm sure," she said. "Publish everything if you don't hear from me within 24 hours. She spent the next hour uploading encrypted files to a secure server, sending access codes to Marcus Webb, and writing a detailed statement explaining everything she'd discovered. When boarding finally began, Maya was the first person in line. The flight to Washington was mostly empty. Maya got a window seat and watched Billings disappear below, the city lights fading to darkness as they climbed into the night sky. She thought about Flight 447 that morning, about the terror of the engine explosion, about the fighter jets that had appeared like harbingers of doom, but turned out to be escorting someone else entirely. What were the odds? An engine failure on the exact flight she'd chosen. A fugitive financier arrested in the chaos. Fighter jets providing cover that made her paranoia seem justified when it was really just cosmic coincidence. Or maybe not coincidence. Maybe the universe had been protecting her all along, giving her exactly what she needed when she needed it most. 3 months later, Maya Rodriguez's face appeared on every major news network. Former Titan Aerospace analyst turned whistleblower testified before Congress today, the anchor announced, detailing a conspiracy that has rocked the defense industry to its core. The story broke like a dam bursting. Marcus Webb's investigation in the Pacific Standard provided the initial reporting, but Maya's testimony to the Department of Defense Inspector General triggered a federal investigation that expanded beyond anyone's expectations. FBI raids on Titan Aerospace headquarters. Congressional hearings broadcast live. Executives led out in handcuffs. Richard Vance was arrested on charges of fraud, manslaughter, and conspiracy. The evidence Maya provided was irrefutable: emails, financial records, falsified safety reports, everything needed to dismantle his carefully constructed lies. 7 other executives faced federal indictment. Titan Aerospace's stock collapsed. Government contracts were suspended pending investigation. The company that had employed 70,000 people began a bankruptcy reorganization, but under new leadership committed to actual safety standards. Most importantly, Captain Jennifer Mills and Lieutenant David Chen were officially exonerated. The Air Force issued new reports acknowledging that defective components, not pilot error, had caused both crashes. Their families received formal apologies, additional compensation, and something more valuable than money: the truth. Maya spent 2 months in protective custody due to credible threats against her life. She testified at 4 separate trials, faced hostile cross-examination from defense attorneys who tried to paint her as a disgruntled employee, and endured death threats that filled her voicemail daily. But she never wavered. The Justice Department granted her immunity for possessing classified documents, acknowledging her status as a protected whistleblower. Congress passed new legislation strengthening safety oversight in defense contracting, naming it the Mills-Chen Aircraft Safety Act. Captain Mills' mother sent Maya a handwritten letter. For 3 years I blamed my daughter for her death. I thought she'd made a mistake, been careless, failed somehow. You gave me back my daughter's honor. You gave our family peace. Thank you will never be enough. 1 year after that terrifying flight, Maya stood at Arlington National Cemetery, watching as new headstones were unveiled for both pilots. The inscriptions no longer mentioned pilot error. They read simply, "Died in service to their country." Maya thought about that day on Flight 447, the explosion that should have killed them, the emergency landing that stranded her perfectly, the fighter jets that appeared for someone else but saved her anyway, Vincent Caruso's arrest providing the exact cover she needed to disappear into chaos. Some people would call it luck. Maya called it something else. She'd boarded that plane in silence, trying to be invisible, hopping to slip through cracks unnoticed. The engine failure had forced her into the light, exposed her to dangers she'd been avoiding, and ultimately given her the courage to stop running and start fighting. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are exactly what we need. Maya never got back on a plane without thinking about that day. Never saw fighter jets without remembering how terror and salvation can look identical from certain angles. Never doubted that telling the truth, no matter the cost, was always worth it. She lived under her own name now, no longer hiding. She'd started a nonprofit supporting whistleblowers in defense industries, helping others find the courage she'd barely possessed herself. And every year on the anniversary of Flight 447's emergency landing, Maya called the families of Captain Mills and Lieutenant Chen, and they talked about the people they'd lost, the truth that had saved others, and the silence that had finally been broken. Because sometimes staying quiet isn't safety, sometimes silence is complicity. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak, even when your voice shakes, even when the world tries to silence you, even when you're terrified of what comes next. Maya Rodriguez had found her voice at 35,000 feet, surrounded by flames and chaos and fighter jets. And she'd never stopped speaking since.